murder in a small town and a mysterious cold case, almost a half-century old.
Unusual?
Very unusual. Very unusual. The death certificate had never been filed as well, which was extremely odd.
A small group of dogged investigators and an incredible coincidence reunite remains of a teen who went missing with her long-lost family.
Being on the receiving end of that phone call, tell me about that day.
I was in shock. I was, what? Really?
When Zoran Mamdani won the mayoral race in New York City last week, it signaled some significant changes for America's largest city. But for those who fear or celebrate the prospects of a socialist city, there's already a West Coast movement playing out in Portland.
I think the Portlandia experience, coming to a city near you should be the most terrifying thing out there.
The COVID epidemic may seem part of pandemics past, but scamming over $300 billion in relief funds is a continuing plague for prosecutors.
Some people may be sitting at home thinking they got away with this. What's your message to them?
My message is we're still on it.
Welcome to Full Measure. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. We begin today with a fascinating true-life cold case story that teaches us about the power of determination and how every life matters, even sometimes to strangers. For Dorothy May Strickland, a 17-year-old who vanished one humid summer night in Florida back in 1979, the dust had long settled on her murder. Her skeletal remains, shuffled between labs and storage, sat unidentified and unburied for 45 years until a chain of coincidences that would finally bring her home. Our remarkable story begins 2 years ago at Millennium Cremation Service in Vero Beach, Florida, when funeral director Rachel DeLashmutt got a call about the skeletal remains of a murdered girl.
We received a call from Indian River County Human Services, who they oversee indigent cremations, that we were to pick up the remains of a young woman who was at the medical examiner's office. After reviewing the paperwork, we found she had been there for over 40 years.
Unusual?
Very unusual. Very unusual. The death certificate had never been filed as well, which was extremely odd.
What was the name on it?
Dorothy May Strickland. No family to collect, no family to order a death certificate, no family to write an obituary. We were instructed to hold on for 120 days to the cremated remains and then scatter at sea.
What stopped you from just doing that without anything further?
It just didn't feel right. Something inside of me just said, there's got to be family. There's got to be someone out there that knows her.
She couldn't find any obvious trails leading to a local family member of Dorothy Strickland, age 17 when she disappeared. Months later, DeLashmutt mentioned the dilemma to a client.
And just making small talk with her, I told her the story, what we had, and she suggested I reach out to her husband. Her husband could maybe help.
The husband is Chuck Sullivan, a well-known local attorney with deep roots and connections in Vero Beach.
What did your wife say when she was describing it? Can you kind of remember how she characterized what had happened?
Well, basically that they had the remains of this poor girl that was murdered years ago, and there was nobody to claim the body. And they didn't, I don't know if they didn't know who she was or they didn't know who her family was. And I said, well, yeah, we can find people. Yeah.
Sullivan started digging into records, databases, and contacted Indian River County Sheriff Eric Flowers.
And I called him and I said, hey, we have this case. Is there anything you can share with me to help me find it? And he said, sure.
So I was at lunch at a local restaurant and I was approached by Chuck Sullivan. Can you help me get some old records from the sheriff's office? And I said, yeah, of course. And so I reached out to our records section and I said, hey, whatever Chuck needs, make sure he gets it.
Any records on Dorothy Strickland's murder were held here in the sheriff's cold case files. In charge of that office, another acquaintance of Chuck Sullivan's,
and some are empty like this one.
longtime detective Ed Glazer.
So the sheriff calls me and says, hey, Chuck, who obviously well known in the community, is interested in Strickland. I said, the only thing I don't think has ever been done, and I'll do it today, or start, it is looking for her school records. And we had it enhanced.
Glazer contacted the school system and asked them to look for family contacts by searching records under the name Dorothy Strickland. Dorothy might have attended school in the county. He also thought to ask clerks to look under the name Clowers, the maiden name of Dorothy's mother, also named Dorothy. And though nothing turned up, that name search turned out to be a fateful and pivotal idea.
Probably within a week, maybe, a lady calls me from the school system and says, hey, you know that I just had a gentleman asking for his school records in Indian River County, and he used the name Dorothy Clowers as his mother. I went, really? You're kidding me. I mean, it's just so coincidental.
A coincidence almost unbelievable. After 45 years, another caller asking the school system about the same name, Clowers, within a week of Glazer. Between the clerks and his own detective work, Glazer located the caller on the other side of the state in Lee County, Florida, and called him on the phone.
I said, this is Ed Glazer with the Indian River, Florida Sheriff's Office, and I'm doing cold case. I ask you one question, does the name Dorothy Strickland or Dorothy Clowers mean anything to you? And literally the phone went really quiet, and he, a couple of minutes later, not a couple minutes, a couple seconds later, so felt like minutes, says, she was my baby sister. And I'm like, what? Both of us are like, what? What are you calling me for? And I said, wait a minute now, we need to slow down. You remember anything about her disappearance? And he said, not only am I her brother, but she has 2 living sisters that live in Cocoa.
My name is Marvin McDonald.
And what's your relationship to Dorothy or Dot?
I'm her baby brother by adoption.
And I'm Rebecca Clowers. I'm her sister.
It just so happened that McDonald called the school district looking for his own records under his mother's name, Clowers, shortly after Detective Glazer's call to the school system. His mind reeled as Glazer explained to him that Dorothy's remains were in Vero Beach.
That point on, that phone call, it was like an out-of-body experience almost, because it was just weird. It just kind of like opened up old wounds and everything and brought some memories back and stuff. And after that, I called my wife and called my sister and stuff and started letting everybody know what was going on.
Being on the receiving end of that phone call, tell me about that day.
I was in shock. I was, what? Really? Nobody has talked about that, because, we look through pictures and stuff like that, but it's like, we don't really talk about that, because it was like when we was young. So I guess we just put it out of our mind because it's been so long. And my mom never talked about it.
The memories of Dorothy's disappearance in 1979 are fuzzy.
I just remember the police were at our house that day, and everybody was upset, and that's really all I basically remember from that. And then we was told she was gone, and after that I'm 5, so there really wasn't too much else I could do or know.
A scratchy photo is the only image we have of Dorothy today. Piecing together her last moments, Detective Glazer says she'd partied with cousins at a bar in nearby Fort Pierce, hitched a ride home with 2 men, then decided to go back out after midnight, never to return.
He seems to remember the pine trees, these.
Then 7 months later, in February 1980, hunters stumbled on her skeleton here, partly covered in foliage. The detective who first reported to the scene back then pointing out the spot for us today.
We came back here and they showed me the body. Actually, it was just laying in the dirt.
Dorothy's identity was confirmed through a ring and dental overbite. The family moved on, burying the grief amid subsequent tragedies. 2 other siblings also murdered over the years in unrelated incidents. Now, after all this time, Dorothy's remains are finally in the hands of her loved ones.
And I'm just glad that they brought our sister back to our family.
Yep.
A series of coincidences and determination bringing a long-lost sister home to her family 45 years later, thanks to people who never met her and a funeral director who chose not to bury unanswered questions.
God's grace, just how everything fell together. Everybody had a part, how everybody had a part in it, and how, I mean, it was just amazing how it all just, pieces fell into place where they should have been.
As for who murdered 17-year-old Dorothy Strickland, the investigation is still open and now active with Detective Glazer on the case. Ahead on Full Measure, socialism shift, why some Americans no longer see the ideology as taboo. New York City's next mayor, Zohran Mamdani, is promising to shake up the establishment by establishing a number of initiatives that lean on socialist agendas, such as a rent freeze, free transit, and universal health care. That's rattling a lot of New Yorkers and prompting promises of action from President Trump. For those encouraged or concerned by the new mayor's proposals, there's already one American city leaning hard to the left. We sent Scott Thuman to Portland, Oregon to investigate.
Ask almost anyone in America's 26th largest city of Portland, Oregon, about their city, and they go into a virtual sales pitch about the Willamette River, the abundant nature, food scene, and friendly residents, all of which checks out. But they also can't ignore the very real challenges they face that have of late altered the feel of that laid-back lifestyle. Crime, a high homeless population afflicted with drug addiction and mental illness, and taxes in Multnomah County that rank second only to New York.
This is all new home furniture.
For Pamela Paulette, who's owned her store, City Liquidators, for 4+ decades, the system has been failing for too long.
People don't feel safe. The homeless need, we need to be safe and they need to be safe. And what I see and what I've experienced in this last 18 months is that it's a different demographic. They're younger, they're on drugs, and they're violent.
But it's not just about what she sees on the streets that worries her. It's also City Hall.
There are, a handful of council members now who describe themselves as socialists.
Correct, yes, scary.
Why do you say scary?
Well, because I know what a socialist is. They're not representing me or a lot of my customers.
And that, some critics claim, could be a preview for other major cities like New York, about to go through another notable change.
I can see the dawn of a better day for humanity.
34-year-old self-described socialist Zohran Mamdani promised to raise taxes, freeze rent prices, and had advocated for defunding the police, only backing off of that stance late this summer when his political future began to shine, which mirrors some of the elements of the progressive push in Portland that now has 4 socialist Democrats on the 12-person city council. They call themselves the Peacocks, short for Progressive Caucus. They recently doubled down on Portland's sanctuary status, making it a legally binding city ordinance. Other plans include increasing protections for renters and redirecting $2 million from the police to city parks. They also want to raise taxes on the rich. Army veteran Mitch Green is among them and says that label socialist is often misinterpreted.
Would you describe Portland as a socialist city?
It's mostly a progressive city, and a lot of those people identify in the modern period as democratic socialists, which is sort of just worrying about universal access to goods, things like housing, healthcare, childcare, taxing with a progressive tax structure, so that way the wealthy pay a larger share than the poor.
And then what do you say to critics who look at a lot of socialist programs and ideas and say, well, it's just more free stuff for more people that other people have to pay for?
I would just say that everyone is currently paying for the costs of underinvesting in those resources. And so we can pay up front and provide a meaningful life for everyone, or we can pay on the back end where people have suffered and it's probably more expensive.
Though some business owners say with high taxes, a 35% vacancy rate downtown, and one of the lowest police to population ratios in large cities in the country at 1.26 officers per 1,000 people, they simply can't afford more expensive social programs. On the streets of Portland, debate over the socialist movement.
I am all for socialism. As you said, that they're new. There's a huge learning curve on that council because they're a bunch of noobs and they're all learning how to work together.
Am I a Democrat? Yes. Do I believe in what they're doing? Absolutely not.
Dan Mason is one of Oregon's representatives to the Republican National Committee.
I think a lot of the big government Democrats have been running Portland for a lot of years, and we have gone backwards. We've lost employers. The quality of life is continuing to deteriorate.
What do you think of the idea of having 4 people who say they're socialists on the city council?
No, it's terrifying because I think it's anti-capitalist, anti-free enterprise, and that's not going to attract the small business, the small restaurant, all the different things that made Portland great.
The councilman we spoke to talked about a kind of a coast-to-coast movement or revolution for socialism, whether it's here in Portland or whether it's in New York City with Mamdani.
The Portlandia experience, coming to a city near you should be the most terrifying thing out there, because especially if you live on the East Coast, if you live in the South, you can look at all of the experiments that the city government has tried to pull off and see it hasn't worked.
You're saying if you're in a city anywhere else in the country and it starts to feel like Portland, they should be concerned?
Absolutely.
So just how far and wide could concerns be over socialist cities? Well, if members of the Democratic Socialists of America on city councils, including in Portland and New York City, are the beginning, there are at least 8 other cities with socialist or so-called progressive representatives on their councils. For Full Measure, I'm Scott Thuman, Portland, Oregon.
Coming up next on Full Measure, COVID criminals still cheating us out of our tax money by the billions. You might think the COVID nightmare is behind us, but in terms of financial cost, we'll be paying the price indefinitely. One toll comes in the form of the staggering amount of COVID relief fraud, 300 billion tax dollars stolen by con artists. Mackenzie Frost reports.
More than 5 years into the first COVID lockdown, COVID fraud cases continue to rack up.
This was an opportunity that was maybe too good to pass up for a lot of criminals.
The Department of Justice has charged more than 3,000 people, businesses, and entities with fraud-related COVID crimes. Sean Green is a lead prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Maine. He says his office has prosecuted about 15 COVID fraud cases.
The most common programs where we saw the fraud were in paycheck protection programs.
Does one stick out to you?
A gentleman named Mark Haley, he had applied for roughly $1.5 million worth of PPP funds. He succeeded in getting just over $1 million. He did this by filing a number of false applications. He did not have a real business. He did not have real businesses. He did not have employees, but his applications, of course, said what they needed to say to obtain the money. He was convicted by guilty plea. He was sentenced to a term of 18 months in prison and, of course, ordered to pay restitution for the full amount of the fraud.
Some fraudsters don't act alone. The Government Accountability Office finds 46% of people convicted of COVID-related fraud were charged with conspiracy, suggesting involvement of an organized group. In Maine, Tyree Jones is an example.
What Mr. Jones did is he went around New England, particularly Maine and New Hampshire, recruiting people he knew, saying essentially, hey, I can get you money from the government. All I need from you is your social security number, some of your personal identifiers. You give me your bank account information, the money will show up. The catch, of course, is this. When the money shows up, I need you to give me $10,000.
Jones pleaded guilty, was sentenced to 24 months in prison and ordered to pay nearly $360,000 in restitution. Some took it even further, masterminding the largest COVID fraud case in the country.
We're following some breaking news right now. In the last hour, a jury has found the ringleaders of the largest pandemic aid scam in the country guilty on all charges.
In Minnesota, 47 people face charges including conspiracy, wire fraud, money laundering, and bribery. The DOJ says the fraudsters got nearly $250 million taxpayer dollars meant to feed needy children and instead enriched themselves.
And fortunately, legally, the statute of limitations has been extended to deal with two areas, particularly the Paycheck Protection Program fraud that I mentioned a moment ago, but also economic injury disaster loans.
What do you think motivated these criminals?
Opportunity and greed. The same thing that motivates anyone for any financial crime, I suppose. You had really a once in a generation, more than once in a generation disaster, a need for money to go out immediately. The application process was not particularly difficult. The applications were submitted online. They were submitted to third-party lenders who would underwrite and issue the loans, and they were fully backed and guaranteed by the SBA, the Small Business Association. And so the money went out rather quickly with limited scrutiny.
Are these people who are computer whizzes, or are they average Joes?
The cases we've had have certainly not been criminal masterminds. These were internet portals where people could type in information, provide some false substantiation that could be done just by doctoring some basic documents. And it really wasn't very sophisticated crimes.
Because we are 5 years out from the start of the pandemic, and some people may be sitting at home thinking they got away with this, what's your message to them?
My message is we're still on it, we're still working it. When we have the evidence and we can convict people of these crimes, we do and we will.
In all, investigators say fraudsters managed to get their hands on $300 billion in COVID assistance, and the public may never know the full scope of the scams. For Full Measure, Mackenzie Frost in Portland, Maine.
And after a break, what's ahead next week on Full Measure? Coming up next week on Full Measure, a chemical added to our drinking water for decades is now the subject of health concerns and action.
It is a poison, and folks don't know that.
There are many studies on the other side saying that there is no risk that comes with fluoride.
The vast majority line up on this side of fluoride potentially being harmful.
Our continuing investigation into the potential dangers of fluoride next week on Full Measure. Until then, we'll be searching for more stories that hold powers accountable. Thanks for watching. I'm Sharyl Attkisson.